Oh, well, we do have a camera here, but it's currently on me. But we'll do an audience shot when I get off the stage and let you go ahead with everything.
Okay.
You've got a few helpers in the room. We do have a small audience, but I'm assuming we have a nice large audience online as well. So everyone's looking forward to this. But I'll turn the floor over to you and let you get going. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let me go ahead and share the screen here. And pop up to the top here. Here we go. And sure, press the right button. There we go. Okay, thanks everyone. All right, so those of you who have some laptops in front of you in the room, or if you're watching the recording of this, you can pop up your laptop. We're going to be taking some timeouts through this session, to jump into the dashboard and some of the tools and things like that. This is a session to help anybody out there, whether you're present right now at APNIC 58, whether you're online or whether you're watching this later on, because APNIC records everything for a reason. It's so that engineers and people who are trying to figure out how to solve a problem, they can refer back to the APNIC videos that we're doing like right now and go like, there's the answer I need to actually, in this case, help protect my network. All right. So that's kind of like what we're doing through here. Now, all these materials, the PDFs will be there. If you look through here and you see like a cool slide and you say like, I want to use that slide in my presentation, you just ping me, all right? Just email me and say, hey, Barry, can I get a copy of that slide? And I'll send you over the PowerPoint or the Google slide. And so you can get that. Why do we do things like that? Because we would rather you, as an engineer and an operator, to actually spend time convincing somebody, hey, we should do this to protect our network, or we should do this to be more resilient, right? Things like that, versus trying to play around with graphics. If you can grab my graphic and that makes things easier for you, all good with that. All right. So that's kind of like some policies with that. So again, my name is Barry Green. I've been around the APJ region of internet building out for a long, long time. I'm very passionate about helping, more brain power apply themselves to building a resilient and robust internet community. Right. That's what this APNIC, has been all about since the very inception of it. And so here's my contact information. Connect me on LinkedIn. You email me if you have questions. I'm somebody who likes to help people out with it. Now, what we're going to be going through, there's a lot different things here, is some rethinking of what's happening with, how you can actually tap into the Shadow Server Foundation's nonprofit cyber work. There's several different organizations that we're helping to get out in the region that are nonprofit cybersecurity organizations and tools and services and open source that will help you in your security architecture and security resiliency strategy, how you build things out as a network. And one of the things that you'll hear around the APNIC apricot community is that a lot of times we in Asia Pacific are very, let's go get a vendor to come in. And what we find is the most resilient networks are the ones who have the personal seeking of knowledge, experience, and empowering, and then work with the vendors, right? And so this is where you take tools like Shadow Server, Quad9, a lot of different open source tools, and and work with those first to build your security architecture, expand out, you gain experience, and then you say, okay, now I need to scale. I think I need this commercial tool, and you know exactly what to look for because you're doing it from experience. You're doing it from, like in Shadow Server's case, I have been doing my risk reduction. I have been closing down and plugging up holes with Shadow Server so I can reduce the risk to my network so I don't have ransomware and APT and so a lot of these threat vectors that Shadow Server the reports that we'll be talking about is able to do. So that's kind of like what we're doing with this. Now, this material is traffic light protocol. If you don't know traffic light protocol is a tool we use within the security community. So we can say, here's confidentiality across different national boundaries. Because what happens is you go to Japan, they have their way of classifying information. You go to Interpol, they have their way. You go down to Colombia, they have way. The United States has their way. So we have these different mixes of how people like to say, this is a confidential piece of information. What the cybersecurity community has come up with is traffic light protocol. It's governed out of first.org. It's been working for years. TOP clear means you share with everybody. If it's TOP red, notice XXX, it's in a very small group. It's top secret. We're working on a takedown, if it's TOP red. So we do things like use an email, TOP red. That means you don't share it with anybody because it's confidential. We're working on a takedown to go after bad guys or a new vulnerability coming out, right? So this is kind of a quick one on the TOP traffic light protocol tool. Now, you'll hear this several times through the presentation. If you have not signed up to the Shadow Server Foundation public mailing list, please take some time right now to do that, all right? Please take some time right now to actually go out here and go to mail that Shadow Server, the public mailing list. And just to, let me back up here. I'm just going to break out a slide presentation and just drop this into, our Zoom chat box here. So we can say everybody here, I'm going to be doing several times like this. Everybody in the meeting. So we'll pop this in. So you have the link directly. All right, so that way it makes it easy for you to click on that. Now, why that is important, you'll hear that many different times. Just as an individual engineer, if you do any sort of engineering work on the internet, if you're a network architect, if you're a security engineer, if you're a systems engineer, if you're a cloud architect, sign up to this mailing list because Shadow Server plugs into trusted communities that no other organization plugs into, and alerts come out. We'll be talking about several examples of these sort of alerts. And if you get ahead of the game by saying, oh, Shadow Server just alerted on the Zycel vulnerability. Let me go search on my network. Shadow Server presents the Zycel. Oh, I got several of these Zycel firewalls on my network. Let me go patch them quick before the bad guys use it. So we'll be referring to that over and over again. Shadow Server right now in 2024 is doing a lot of work on getting the word out via YouTube. So there's a lot more videos. So these videos also get announced on social media and also on the public channel. There's more, there's regular, about one every other week, about twice a month. There's a new tutorial like the one we're doing right now. So this will be linked in a playlist. So this video will be hosted over on the APNIC YouTube channel, and then we'll cross-link it together, right? So people can kind of see the materials in here. But so go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you get any updates with it. We're going to have an ask. The ask is we're trying to work on doing some really basic risk mitigation because there are threat actors out there from ransomware and state actors using really, really simple tools. One thing we're working on right now, and this is kind of like, really ironic. This goes back to a presentation I actually did at Apricot 1, the first Apricot back in 1997. I did a talk called The Side Door, the security side door, not the front door, not the back door. You had the side door, and the side door was through the network devices. Here's how you use simple network management protocol to break into networks. Well, guess what? You got groups like, the Chinese state actors and some of the other state actors, right, are using simple tools like simple network management protocol to figure out how to get into your network. Okay, so we're going to be an ask. Go to your network, use the Shadow Server tools. It will show you all the exposed SNMP, and we'll get it fixed. And then the same thing, we'll talk about one of the biggest security threats we have on the internet today is BGP sessions are not being protected with some of the most basic tools that we actually figured out how to protect BGP sessions 25 years ago, and people aren't doing it. So we want you to protect your network because that helps BGP be protected and it needs to be protected to protect the entire internet, right? So that's the key thing in there, because the risk, here's some of the risk factors. here's simple network management protocol. There's a lot of devices out there wide open with public. I can go out there and connect up to SNMP v2, do a public, do a scan. Oh, wow, I got all sorts of intelligence. We'll talk about that. And then, you know, all the different risks with BGP. We'll talk about these things. So in summary, everything we talk about here, key thing, anybody can sign up to the nonprofit shadow server community toolset, right? If this is the first time you're hearing about it, if this video is the first time you're hearing about it, this is part of the public benefits, our cyber civil defense sort of delivery to the community as a nonprofit, right? So if you have an ASN, you have an IP address, you have domain name, you sign up for the reports. Now, if it's, and we'll talk about, you know, what is expected when you sign up for it. And then these reports can be delivered via email or API. All right. So a lot of times people sign up first to start getting the emails, and then you sign up for the API, and you can integrate the API into all sorts of your tools that you have in your network. All right. So that's kind of like the summary with this. So this is all information that's out there wide open. And how do you subscribe to the free reports? If you're listening to this right now and you want to start doing it right now, you go to the Shadow Server website, you go over here and click on the top left, and it says click here to subscribe. There you go. And you follow the information, follow the links, put the details into the link on the daily reports, and you get a ticket. And then Shadow Server evaluates. Is this domain really belong to you? Are you accountable, or you're an admin? Let's do some identity checks and validation checks. And Shadow Server does that because its confidentiality policy is, as it's scanning massive amounts of information across all over the internet, some of the best scanning capability out there, it makes sure that the information that it gains only goes to the appropriate people. So Shadow Server never sells any data, right? So it's not sold, all right? It goes to, you know, if it's your IP address block, if it's a /24 allocated to you, then the people should be looking at it are you, right? Or the one exception is the national CSIRT. Like if I'm in country X is national CSIRT, and we work with all the national CSIRTs using the guidelines, you know, with the open CSIRT program, right? Is what we do. All the APIs are documented online. If you have email questions on this, you know, if you already have Shadow Server email reports, you want to get the APIs, you just send a note to contacts and you say, hey, I'd like to get my API key. And you can do multiple keys, and we'll talk about that. So there's a quick introduction to what we're going to be doing over the next hour. Now, the world's changed. And the world's changed because we're not in an environment that if you're going to get attacked, it's like when you're going to get attacked, and do you know if the attack is actually going to happen to you? Right. So that's the challenge. It's a you know, interesting environment. Now, one of the things that I kind of break things down, I break things into 4+1 of the big threat actors. Now, everybody knows about cyber criminal guys. Cyber criminals are probably the easiest to understand because their goal is simple. Don't work hard, take the easy path, find an easy way in, make money without working hard. I get very frustrated when I go out there and hear policymakers go like, oh, sophisticated ransomware attackers. Actually, the vast majority of ransomware teams I see out there are like not hardworking, and they take the easiest path in. So if there's like a vulnerability you leave open on your system, they will take that because that's easy. They won't, you know, there's so much risk out there of open exposed systems, and why take a hard way of getting to make money? If they were a cyber criminal and wanted to work really, really hard, they'd probably get a legitimate job and work at, you know, one of the big companies, right? But that's not what they try to do. So cyber criminals are easy to understand. State actors are also easy to understand. State actors' job is to work for their government. Whether you're the National Security Agency of the United States, or you're the Chinese state security, or you're Iranians, right? You know, it's like you're working for an institution of the government, and you're taking care, you know, you have generals in charge, you have people in charge. So it's not like rogue, like people going off and doing crazy things. Whatever they're doing, they are ordered to do this. All right. So when you see like, you know, the Typhoon crew coming out of the PLA in China. They go like, yeah, they are ordered to do that. All right. So there's checks and balances. They're well understood. And they have their teams. Their teams is corporate threats. Right? So the corporate threats is the nation states, like for instance, Michael Snowden didn't work for the US government. Michael Snowden worked for a contractor contracted to the US government. The same thing happens in China. The same thing happens in Russia. The same thing happens in Iran. The same thing happens in Brazil, right? You have a lot of corporate companies whose job is to work for nation state threat actors. Okay? So that's also well understood. The one that it's harder to understand are the political activists and what I now call the rise of the privateers. And the privateers are crews of teams who actually, they're not really linked to state actors, but they kind of do their thing. And are they getting paid? We don't know, but they do things. And this is the KillNet, the Anonymous Sudan, the groups like that. The political patriotic protesters those are the hacktivists to say, well, I don't like Whalen. I don't like things like that. So you get these sort of things that happen, with them. And those are the variables, right? So these are the variables. So this is how I kind of break down my threat actors and understanding the threat. And with everything, I kind of really focus on the target, right? Who are the people behind it? Because you take like DDoS, all right? Computers don't do DDoS. People do DDoS, right? Somebody is sitting behind the mechanisms to actually launch the attack, to perpetrate the crime, to rob the bank, right? You don't want to go to a briefing and find out from the sheriff after a bank robbery and have the sheriff describe all the different aspects of the AK-47 used in the bank robbery. They don't want to, people don't want to hear that. They want to hear about the people who did the bank robbery, right? So remember, everything we talk about with like the threat, that threat is always you're going against a human threat actor. All right. It's there's many times that people kind of focus on here's the bot, or here's the DOS attack, or, is it a volumetric attack, or is it a packet per second attack, or is it some sort of aspect of a backdoor into a system, right? So it's always the people involved with it. The other thing to be mindful of these days, and you'll see it as we go through some of the shadow server dashboard data, the public data, is it's just, you're going to get hit. It's a force of nature, right? It's like if I live in a typhoon, tsunami, hurricane zone, if I live in the middle of, like in the Midwest of the United States, you're in Tornado Alley. It's not if you're going to get hit by a tornado, you're going to get hit by a tornado. If you live in a flood zone next to a river, it's not if you're going to get flooded, you're going to have a flood. If you live in Florida, you're going to get a hurricane. If you live in the Philippines, you're going to get a typhoon, right? If you live here in California, like where I'm sitting at right now, you're going to have an earthquake. It's just inevitable. It's just going to happen, right? And the old ways of how we had to try to do things, well, if I try to like just put a circle around here, Kura, New Zealand, right? And try to defend it, it doesn't work anymore. You can't just, build a moat around your country and have a cyber dome and things like that. Those things don't work out because the whole thing is all meshed together. As we all know here, because you're at APNIC, and what does APNIC do? They hand out IP addresses in autonomous systems. We link by autonomous systems. That's how we link things together. So when you take things like NotPetya, right, which was a, NotPetya went out and spread all over the world. It was actually targeted. It was supposed to target something, but it got all over the place because we're all interconnected by autonomous systems, not hard physical geographic borders. So if you want to go out there and protect yourself, then you have to have a mentality of saying, yes, I'll build defenses around my autonomous system, around my enterprise, around my country, but I'm also going to go and push out. And if I'm getting computers infected in Thailand, Brazil, United States, and Canada, and they're being used to actually attack you, well, what you want to do is go out there to the places where those computers got infected and used by bad guys and see work with other places to actually get those cleaned up. Collaboration is key to how we have to protect ourselves. And this is one of the value of working with a group like Shadow Server, because Shadow Server is collaborating with thousands of organizations all over the world, and that is increasing. Because in environments today where cyber war is day in, day out, because we have several cyber wars happening right now. Yes, you see the Russia Ukraine as one of them, but there are more, right? Around the Middle East and other places, there's conflict. And you're either a target, okay? You're collateral damage, in other words, like not Petra, lots of collateral damage, or you avoided it and said, whoops, that missed me. Tomorrow, you could be collateral damage. The next day, you could be the target. And that's the issue in the environment we live on today. We're going to have a consistent world view where there's cyber war happening somewhere. And it doesn't matter where you are. If you are interconnected on the global telecom/internet system, you are at risk. That's just the reality of it. Now, how at risk are you? During Ukraine, Russia, right? There was actually a lot of cyber criminal activity that collaborated, between Ukrainian criminals and Russian criminals and Belarusian criminals. Okay, so you had Conti, the Conti ransomware crew, which comprised of Ukrainians and Russians. So here they are. They're going like, okay, it's not going to be politically correct for us to work with each other. So as criminals, we have to divide up our little treasury pieces of the pie. But if we start dividing things up and we having all the good guys looking at us, we are at risk. Our criminal operation is at risk. So what do? We need a distraction. What do we do? Oh, let's take down a country. Now, when this happened, myself and many other cybersecurity professionals will go like, holy cow, the Russians are retaliating and this is going on. This is a retaliation attack because Costa Rica signed up and says, we will support Ukraine. And we all thought this was going on. And we were all wrong. That was not their objective. That wasn't Conti's objective. People say, oh, Conti's doing this, being a Russian affiliate. No, it wasn't that. It was all about like, here, pay attention to this hand. And I'm going to divide up into multiple different groups. Okay. That's essentially what was going on with it. But think about this. Any country is at risk when you actually have enough of smart cyber criminals. And a smart cyber criminal sets up the infrastructure so they don't have to work hard, but they also have the tools to make it happen, to make it as easy as possible. And they could take those tools and say, okay, let's disrupt the entire country. That's the risk factor we're doing. That's where the world has changed around us, right? So in the old days, back in the 90s, early 2000s, we always used to say there are two types of companies. There are those who know they've been hacked and those who have been hacked and don't know it. But now there's a third type. And this is one of the things that Shadow Server is working with to try to get out of the paralysis, that that the attack is happening. It's sitting in your network and you don't know what to do. You're paralyzed. You're paralyzed into inaction. And part of the cyber civil defense tools that Shadow Server provides for free, doesn't cost you, because there's an alliance of organizations that fund Shadow Server, gives you the tools so you can go out there and start taking action in a very daily, systematic way to protect your network. And if we don't do this, it's not working well. So this is data from Statistica. Statistica did this survey looking at a couple of data points on what's going on with cybersecurity. Well, number one, if you're a cybersecurity company, it's a good business to be in. See, it's going up. There's good money in building tools, certifications, regulations, vendors, architectures, solutions, right? Pen testing, headcount, all this. There's good money in cybersecurity. So it's very job secure area, right? Going up. Now, we should expect over time that as an industry spends more money to solve the problem, we should be seeing the risk reduced, right? That's what we should be seeing. We should be seeing the risk reduced. Is the risk reduced? Same study, Market Insights, Statistica, that blue area is way down at the bottom. It's way down at the bottom. It's not good. Look, it's the cost of cybercrime. It's going up and up and up. It's not going down. we're spending tons of money to prevent cybercrime, but yet the cybercrime keeps on going up. Something isn't working. When you get data like this, something isn't working. This is why myself and several of my colleagues were doing a lot more of this nonprofit cyber work, because we have to find some different ways of doing things. And the Shadow Server Foundation is one of the interesting ways of doing this. So this is our risk reality. Because a risk reality, when you look at this, there's something out there. There's a threshold here, right? And the reality is this: there's a limited number of threat actors out there, right? Those threat actors don't want to work too hard, right? And they want to focus on return on investment. Okay. Now, the threat actor could be like working for a government agency. So if I'm working for a government agency, right, I'm working for some government and I'm tasked to go in there to say, break into all the routers inside the mobile network of this country. There's only a few of us. I don't want to work hard. I want to focus on drinking my coffee, right? I don't want to work hard. I work for a government, right? Governments aren't known to having hardworking people, right? And so I want to focus on return of investment, right? So I will find the easiest path to get in, right? So I'm going to find the easiest path to get into my target to meet my objective. If I want to get ransomware into a network, I'm going to find the easiest path, right? And I'm going to try to figure out, can I get money moved into my accounts? In other words, you'll look at the other factors. No sense of targeting a company if they have no money. No sense of targeting a country if I can't get money out, right? We see a direct linkage to like, how do I move and how do I actually, achieve my objectives? So it was funny, back in 2015, I was in Indonesia and I was given a security talk like this, and people asking me, how come we're not seeing a lot of ransomware in Indonesia? And I said straight up, because in Indonesia, the Ukrainians who specialize in writing up the threat messages, pay me money or I'm going to expose all your data or I'm going to encrypt your data, right? The Ukrainians don't have good ways of translating from Ukrainian to Bahasa, Indonesian, right? And they all laughed at that. So it's like, yeah, that's the limitation. The risk is all there, but there's no point of trying to do the work if I can't communicate to somebody who says, pay me the money in Bahasa, right? And it's the same thing in some of the other countries inside the Asia Pacific region. In the APNIC region, some of the big limitation on cybercrime is not because the risk is not there. The risk is there, easy to break into. We will see with some of the shadow server stuff, right? It's just that people don't know how to actually talk to Japanese from Brazil, okay? I speak Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, right? And trying to communicate as a ransomware threat actor into Japanese, and they scratch their head. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how the Japanese banking system work. If I send them send me to this Bitcoin wallet, would somebody in Japan understand that? Let me try it. Nobody understands this. Okay, I'm not going to bother with Japan. Doesn't mean Japan's not under risk. It just means the language is there. So understand, we have a throttle because of these mechanisms. Right? The risk can be that much greater, right? This is what this risk reality change with it. Now, how do we know this is out there, right? Well, this is where we're going to be playing around with this with the Shadow Server dashboard here, right? So in here, I'm going to type into the chat. So those of you who see it, dashboard.server.org. So if you go to the dashboard, we're going to be playing around with that. So I dropped this into the chat. Go up here, type into your computer. If you see this, if you're watching the video, go ahead and go to the Shadow Server dashboard. And this is a public tool, right, that the UK government funded to actually, so anybody, as you can see right now, you can see the risk that's out there of things that we can do out there. So you take, like, for instance, one of the things we're trying to do is get more people plugged in so they can see where the risk is at. So like in, part of these presentations is to get more people signed up. So you take, like, this was a snapshot from last month on ASEAN, where we're trying to get more autonomous systems plugged in. So you notice on here, there's about 198 autonomous systems, who are plugged into Shadow Server across the ASEAN region, right? I kept it ASEAN slide versus doing an Asia Pacific slide. It puts it a little bit more concentrated, narrow focus within the APNIC community, right? And you got over 6,000, you know, ASNs who aren't consuming the reports. And these reports are super, super valuable. In my times in running networks, right, from the inception of Shadow Server when it was created 20 years ago until like last year when I wasn't part of running event network, right, and I'm doing stuff inside Shadow Server, I was always using Shadow Server dataset, right? And this is free. It helps take action. It saved my butt over and over again. So this is how we're kind of rethinking, you know, some of the how we do our cybersecurity work. Now, who is Shadow Server? Let's talk about Shadow Server. You know, some people here might have, you know, remember hearing about Shadow Server, but you're not plugged into it. Some might never have heard of Shadow Server. Others know of it, but never got around to signing up. Here, we're going to help you get signed up. Many have signed up, but then you got to go into an email box because the information is so overwhelming. You needed APIs, you need something easier, or you need somebody to actually teach you through how to actually use the reports effectively. That's what these webinars, the work at APNIC, the work at Apricot, right? That's what these sessions are all about, right? We got some, might be here, might be power users. And it's really fun seeing some of the power users of some of the big telcos who use this day in, day out, right? They know exactly who's at risk on the network, which customers are at risk, which things they need to work on every single day, right? So they can prioritize because they're leveraging the API. They got to integrate it into their data lake. You know, then you get the power users out there. And then we got a very few sorts, you know, who actually support the part of the Shadow Server Alliance and say, we need Shadow Server to do more, plug more networks in to go out there and say, hey, here's networks in Vietnam are being abused by bad guys. Hey, Shadow Server, go work with Vietnam, go work with Cambodia, go work with in Kenya, go work with you know, in Colombia or Uruguay, right? Who are being used for attacks, right? So this allows somebody sitting in Asia Pacific to say, okay, I got threat actor risk of devices in Honduras being used to attack my network in Asia Pacific. Hey, let's work with Shadow Server, work with the Honduras CERT team, and let's work on reducing the risk together, right? So that's the sort of thing that the Alliance does, right? And what the Alliance is, these are different organizations. The icon's a little bit out of date. I need to update this. There are more Alliance members out there. But basically what the Alliance members do, right, is they keep this containment going. Because Shadow Server has been doing this for 20 years. You know, 20 years of actually sitting on top of like sinkholes and malware and different command and control infrastructure and things like that. It's kind of like one person called it, if anybody remembers the Ghostbusters movies, this is the ecto containment of bad malware, you know, activity going on in the internet. And that's one of the roles that happens out there. So Shadow Server, it's low key. It doesn't go out there and brag. You don't see big press releases. Hey, a big takedown happened. What you'll see is emails that say, hey, here's a new risk. Please go out there and check your network, right? So what happens is there's a lot of organizations who don't know that they can get access to the free tooling, right? And then there's other organizations who want to fund efforts to actually reduce the risks to their business, reduce the cyber risk to the business. They don't know that there's a group like Shadow Server's out there, right? So core thing you're kind of picking up, it's a nonprofit organization working behind the scenes, quietly, working with the internet to make everybody some more secure, right? The mission is quite simple. Make the internet more secure by bringing light to the vulnerabilities and malicious activities and emergent threats. In other words, it's showing like, hey, here's a new threat vector. Let's go out there and fix it together. And it's big on sharing, equipping organizations to help you. That's what talks like this is all about. Support criminal investigations. You'll see Shadow Server as in the fine print, always helping like FBI, Europol, Interpol, groups like that, right? So you're always seeing it helping out cyber criminal investigations behind the scenes, helps protect the victims. So we got victim notification to say, hey, by the way, you got an infected website. Can you go fix it? Oh, hey, we think the ransomware guys are about to get into your network. Go patch this quick, right? That's the victim, help protect victims. And then we got all these, you know, free reports, right? That happens out there. So it's driven by this, you know, secure, threat-free internet. That's the core thing, right? That's all about. This is the Shadow Server vision. Ask yourself, what's your vision? Do you want the internet to be more secure for your business? Does your business require digital safety across the internet? Right? Are you promoting a culture of sharing? Do you want to equip organizations to improve your security? And do you want your customers to be more secure? Right? Do you want to support criminal investigations? So you remember, it's not the bots that are the problem; it's the people controlling the bots. So you want to lock them up. All right, that's the key thing. You want to lock them up. All right, and then help protect the victims and partners, and the whole supply chain aspect of it. So that's our story. I'm going to flip through the story part now. How effective is Shadow Server? And we'll be walking through why this is. So one of our partners out there that works with us, Vulncheck. So they're a brand new company that goes and signs up to help you as an organization. In other words, there's tools like Shadow Server provides, and there's commercial tools that go even more tuned into the environment. And they were doing a survey of which organizations get the word out quickest about new exposures and active exploits. And, people are kind of surprised. Shadow Server right in the middle. It's because it's the focus of it. You see other government agencies out there putting lots and lots of money in there. Lots of corporations putting lots and lots of money in lots of teams. And you have Shadow Server, a really, really small team as a nonprofit, focus on that one thing, getting the word out to you that, hey, you are at risk as fast as possible so you can fix it. So you got a small, lean, powerful team. And then you got the alliance members. So the alliance members are interacting. So these are the people who fund the nonprofit activity, and they're constantly interacting. So we got some top talent through the alliance members. We got all the national CSIRT teams. We got law enforcement that steps in, right? Because they do their investigations. And you got a whole bunch of TLP Red, TLP Amber, Strict security trust groups, and those investigative work. Then you got cybersecurity companies that plug in, right? You got vendors that plug in. You got IoT partners that plug in. You got security researchers who will call up and say, hey, Shadow Server, I found something. Can you guys run a scan on this? I'm going to announce this at this conference. Sure. Let's quote the reports. Shadow Server has a policy that works with threat researchers. They check them out and go look at it and say, you want to announce it at this conference? We keep it TLP Red until the conference. We set up the scans. We set up reporting. As long as everybody understands that what Shadow Server is going to do is put the word out. So as soon as it goes disclosure, so as soon as the word goes out and you announce at the conference, what Shadow Server is going to do is then say, here's the new report. Here's how you fix the risk. All right. And so that's kind of like how it works with the researchers and a bunch of different security organizations out there. So what does Shadow Server deliver? We've been talking about these reports, right? Provide these critical security data as a public benefit. We have the logos that say it's free of charge. Yes, it's free of charge of you, but the data is not free. What you have is you have companies who sign up to the nonprofit alliance, all right, and fund the effort for the greater interests of everybody, right? Because it protects my organization. If I'm running a big telco, it helps protect me if I'm helping every other telco, get protected. Of course, you want other telcos to fund into it. So there are 4 big buckets, right? There's the sinkholes, the scanning, the sensors, the sandboxes, right? So sinkholes is basically if I have malware and I'm taking it down with an IP address block or a domain name block, Shadow Server is as I said, the Ecto Containment Center. Shadow Server is a great place to actually say, hey, I got this command and control. We want to sinkhole it. Shadow Server, can you do it for us? Because it's funded to happen and it's plugged into the telemetry. Because once you sinkhole, you take a command and control for a botnet, and you take over that IP address and you put it into the sinkhole, every single one of those bots are going to still try to talk to that command and control. And what Shadow Server does is it then turns around and says to the organizations into your reports and say, hey, you got infected, right? So that's part of this, so it's not just sinkholing to take down the bot. It's actually then starting the notification so we can get them cleaned up, right? So that's sinkholing. Scanning IPv4 and IPv6, right? It's over 3.7 billion a day. It's over 1.7 billion a day. And there's algorithms that we have because we don't scan all of V6. We scan the hot live links of V6, and we have different tricks that we've developed and keep on evolving to find out what are those hot V6. What are the V6 that's been turned on, and that's what gets scanned. We got a ton of sensors, honey nets, other devices out there that actually looks for when criminals are trying to log in and break into things. And we got this massive sandbox infrastructure for binaries. If you do binary exchange, we got these huge, infrastructure, that is, as a nonprofit, still a nonprofit, very useful to all the endpoint protection companies out there, right? So when you kind of look at this, what we do, right? You got the internet scanning that happens going on, right? You combine that with the honeypots or sensor networks, right? Combine that with all the malware that's being collected every day. You got the sinkholing that happen. All this then feeds into the daily reports, and all this actually helps out with the different investigations, whether it's a security trust group investigation or a law enforcement investigation or some sort of industry sort of campaign, right? To actually go out there and get things done, to help you in your investigation to go out there and how do I actually get threat actors off my network, right? So this is this whole infrastructure of tools going into this, plus 100 report types every day updated. It could be delivered email into API. You can convert it into a log format so you can put it into Splunk or some tool like that, right? So that's kind of like it's there, right there. Everybody can sign up for it. So what sort of things with it? Let's kind of look at it with the dashboard here, right? So if you go to the dashboard, right, you see the sinkholes there, right? So you get data sets with the sinkholes and you can actually explore it out there. So I'm going to break out of the slide real quick here, all right? And we'll show you here, all right? So we'll drop into the screen here and we'll go to dashboard. If we want to follow along here. So here we are on the Shadow Server dashboard, all right? And when you click on sinkholes here, all right, this is the data we're on right now. So if you go here, they go to scans, here's sinkholes. Now what you can then do is you go over here on the sinkhole data and you can just say, hey, I want to get I'm going to do a tree map. I'm going to find out which countries here. All right, so you can see sinkhole data. So there's a lot of tools out here in the sinkhole, but then I can go out there and say, which of these are most critical, right? And they'll give you a view of critical ones, right? And most of the sinkhole data, because they're malware in there, is sinkhole. But then down here, check this out. Here's all the malware and botnets that are in the sinkhole, right? So you can go over here and you can say, I'm just going to pick one out of here, right? Here's a particular one. Here's this particular malware. There are 16 devices in the United States still with this pretty old malware system, right? So you can go here and kind of figure things out. If you want to see a particular country, go down here and say, okay, let's see. We were using ASEAN as a reference. Here's ASEAN. So here's all the devices right now currently, Vietnam, 65,000 devices with malware sitting on there inside networks, inside firewalls that is in the Shadow Server data sets, right? So this is the sort of things you can start playing around with the dashboard. So that's the kind of like an example of it. So as you listen to this, you want to do some more stuff with it, you can check out the dashboard, right? So we got the sinkhole. The scans is all the data from the scans, right? So you notice the arrows down the bottom, it describes what is happening, what telemetry set Shadow Server is coming from, right? So you got the scans that goes out there and every day scans, outside in, right? So, and we can tell who are really good networks because they have things like, there's no SNMP visible, there's no Telnet visible, there's no, right? Basically you see, you might see some DNS, but you'll see like HTTPS, OpenSSL, right? You'll see valid ports open, right? Is what you'll see with scans. Those are good networks. Bad networks, you see all sorts of things open. Oh, look at that, TFTP. You shouldn't be seeing TFTP on the internet. Honeypots, right? That's part of our sensors. So the honeypots is like, okay, here's a new threat vector. Let's put it into the honeypot to find out how fast does the bad guy use it. So it tracks what we call known exploit vulnerabilities, right? KEV, known exploit vulnerabilities. KEV list, right, is what we got with it, right? That's that part. We can see where the DDoS is coming from. Again, the problem with DDoS isn't where it's coming from. We do want to fix it. You want to look at your network and make sure you don't have devices being used for DDoS, right? But at the same time, we want to go after the bad guys who are launching it, right? So Shadow Server participates with which we'll talk about later on today, with this DDoS suppression community, right? There's a whole bunch of IoT work going on now. So you got the IoT, you got the ICS, you got the OT technologies, right? These are usually things you don't want to ever have on the internet. Oh, like, since you're in New Zealand, if you go across the Tasman Sea over to Australia and have the big mining trucks, these big, super big mining trucks, and they're all wirelessly controlled, that's OT, operational technologies, controlling the truck at the big mining operation. You don't want that truck exposed on the internet. You'd be surprised how many mining operations exposes these huge mining equipment open on the internet. Now you go like, okay, that's a security threat. Yes, it's a big security threat. So you use this report to kind of find it and fix it. Why isn't it exploited? Again, go back to the beginning. How much work does it take to get money out of that company? Oh, I call them up. Hey, your dump truck, I can control your dump truck. Pay me money. And the person on the other side is going to go, what? What's the internet? He's a miner. He knows how to, mine iron ore, right? So you're not, the bad guys know this. Don't work hard, right? It doesn't mean you're at risk. You are at risk. All this sort of stuff is at risk. So you can see the threats with it. So when you plug in the Shadow Server, the other thing that can be mindful of that I found in my experience is you don't send it to one team. You can have like the APIs make it so much easy. You can say, hey, NOC team, here's your API for Shadow Server. Security team for security investigations. Here's your API for Shadow Server. Hey, product security team, here's yours. Hey, SOC, here's yours, right? So you can have multiple APIs if you're a large organization with each team with the API, plug it into their appropriate tool to do their job, because this data is valuable for many different people to actually get the network done, right? So that's our dashboard. But as we go through this, one of the key things to remember is this. Anything Shadow Server sees, the bad guys can see. So if it's popping up on your Shadow Server list, you go like, okay, if Shadow Server can see it, some bad guy can also see it. That's the risk factor here. That's the thing you have to be mindful of, is many people can see it, all right? So again, this is kind of like our reporting here. We kind of did through that slide again, but let's kind of talk about, going back to what I mentioned before, Shadow Server's public email list. So here's like this is from June. So here's a list of different ones multiple times a week. An email comes out and says, operational endgame. Hey, here's how you can get the smoke loader data. Hey, here's a SOC 5 proxy sinkhole. Here's how you can get this. Here's the Zycel. There's another Zycel today, right? So I'll be talking about Zycel today here in a minute. Microsoft. So these are all the time. Now, what's interesting, and I don't have it in these slides here, but I'll just talk through it. There was a joint advisory in the United States with FBI and CISA and a couple other departments talking about Iranian threat actors who are getting ransomware into different networks inside of the United States. And the initial entry point is, how do I get into the network? How do I get inside the network? Is off of these lists. They're using the Microsoft, they're using the VMware. It's right there. So I'm reading through this joint advisory, and Shadow Server announced it like was first out. As soon as the data was there, put it into the scan, put it into the sync, the HoneyNet, was set up the monitoring for it, sent an alert out to the community, right? You signed up the Shadow Server community, right? And if you got it fixed, there you were. You didn't have to worry about these Iranian state actors, right? But they're out there. So this is real stuff, right? So when you sign up to the email list, you'll get something like this. Usually Piotr, who is a co-head of Shadow Server, all right, he sends a note out like this. And so you have like, here's, in this case, the P2P infection malware, right? So here's some details on it. Came from a blog. A lot of times before the blog goes out, they'll send a copy of the blog over to Shadow Server so we can get things ready, those threat researchers and companies to know about it. And then here's the details around it, and here's the how do you get the data, right? That sort of work. And then it goes out to different social media forums. So it's not just the email. You can see there's X and InfoSec and LinkedIn and Blue Sky, right, as the primary ones. So let's take an example of this. And this is an interesting thing about a warning, right? So P2P infect, right? It's old. It's old. This is like 3-4 years ago. This came out, and then the bad guy went away, and then some new bad guy found out they can use it to say, look, nobody fixed it. So some threat actor used it several years ago. And what happens with bad guys, right? Rule number 1 in cyber criminal environment, where you got the 7 principles of highly effective cyber criminals. Principle number 1, don't get caught. Principle number 2, don't work too hard. Principle number 3, don't do anything unless you can make money off of it. So when this came out originally, the light was shine on it, and bad guys go, oh, abandon. Let me go do something else. Don't get caught, right? I call that the cockroach effect. You take cockroaches, they shine light in a room, the cockroaches run away, right? So it doesn't mean the problem is fixed. Well, in this case, the problem was never fixed. The problem was never fixed, right? And then come, in June, it gets reactivated by another threat actor. And it's still a problem right now, right? It's still a problem, right? So this is kind of like one of those things that we're starting to see cycles of, where the alert goes out and some people do the fix, many people don't. And this is one of the things of like starting to do a rethink. We got to get, bad guys will go back and use it again. It worked one time, and 2 years ago it worked, and then nobody's paying attention now. I'll use it again. Nobody bothered to fix it, right? So in here, you got like Redis put out a note. This is like all patchable. This is like a high risk. Redis did their job. They put the word out, all right? So they have everything as a vendor. They've done their job there, but they can't like handhold every single one of their customers that say, please go patch. Please put these best common practices in. It's up to the network owner to do these sort of things, right? And so this is where in your reports, right? So you get this report and you get the details of this report, tells you how to read the report so you can go out there and fix it, right? Now, sometimes you go like some of these reports, I got to figure out how much is going on. So one time I had a reporter says, oh, hey, how about this one vulnerability, PHP vulnerability? How do I get details of it? I said, hey, you can do the dashboard, right? And this is what's a nice thing about it. So here's this particular one, this PHP issue, a blog comes out, and you want to find out more about it. Well, go check out Shadow Server. If you want to find out more about something, it's a vulnerability, go see if Shadow Server's already got a report up, right? So in this case, here was the details of it, right? You go over to the dashboard on Shadow Server. Then you go over to this this section over here on exploited vulnerabilities. So you see up here at the top, you have general statistics, you have IoT, then you have attack statistics. And then on attack statistics, you click on monitoring, the last one. And what that comes up with is these are the top exploited vulnerabilities. Okay? So you got your top exploited vulnerabilities in there. And that will list out, here's the vulnerability, here's the CVE vulnerability, here's a vendor. You can sort by that. You can do like all the Huawei or all the Cisco or all the Netgear, all the Zycel, right? Here's the product type. It's like it's an IoT or ICT, right? And then over here on the actions part, right? So you can, in this particular case, the reporter was looking for this CVE, right? So I pointed to him and said, go to the CVE, so you can find that, all right? And then you can go over to the right side, all right, and see the details. And then you can pop up and you see more details. Okay, there I go. I got more details with it. And then within the details part, I can then click even more, right? And say, okay, there's a chart and there's a map. And I can go out there and say, here's a chart of how much risk is out there. So this one was announced and a bunch of people started patching. So this is what you want to see. This is exactly what you want, what Shadow Server's dream is all about. Here's a risk. get the word out, scan for it, people see it, people start plugging up and fix the risk, and it goes away. Risk solved. Good. This is exactly what Shadow Server is all about. Unfortunately, it's just not out there. Now, in this particular case, it was primarily, the big red zone was 2 countries. So you got China, it's big, and a little small place up there. You kind of look hard and you can start to see the little country up there. This is 2 places where this risk was at, which is probably one of the reasons why it was easy to kind of like get it fixed up. All right. So that's, then you can kind of go through, here's a time series of it, right? Here's just, risk reduction success. So let's take this one today. Email comes out today, Zycel. Zycel, we got another one out there. Zycel puts a security advisor out there. So let me jump out of the presentation here, right? And where this all started from is here. This was a researcher, right? Researcher, contacted Shadow Server and many others out there, says, hey, we're going to disclose this. They did responsible disclosure. They contacted Zycel, right? This is where there's a guidelines of how you do good security research. And if you do guidelines for good security research, you can still get all the credit, because a lot of commercial companies, they go like, well, I want to make sure that, we get our news cycle and we get to get credit for it. So we, it helps increase our stature. That all works with responsible disclosure, because people will keep things TOP red. So here the researcher put the word out, TOP red, Zycel was prepared, Shadow Server was prepared, several national sea certs were prepared, and they put out the details with it. So then Zycel had an opportunity to go out there and say here, and they said, hey, we're ready. We got the CVEs created, we got the code fixes done, right? So they have, good things going on out there. And then Shadow Server is able to go out there and say, hey, we put the scans in. We're already scanning for Zycel, right? So you put more scans in. So here's where the firewall issues are at, right? With this particular one, right? So you see like today, here's a Zycel with it. I popped it up with the reports so you can see where the risk is at, right? And if you want to get this more specific, right? Remember, this is a tool. So we can say, okay, let's take in the AP cert region, right? So this is an AP cert region. Then I can go out there and blow up the map and move this over, right? So you can see here's, around the AP cert member region, area with it, right? So you can see that, right? If you want to see down in the Pacific area, we head down that way. Oh, there you go. Interesting. Not so much of a risk down there. Right? Here's all the Zycel stuff. Right? So here's another view with time series with Zycel. So you can see it's out there. Now, when you get to daily reports, right? So you can see, and then here's like, well, that's it from the last ones. So you can see on the reports that you would get to you would get detailed reports of saying like, here's exactly the device in the network. And the way the reports are set up is the reports are set up so you have the explicit timestamp. So if you're doing the good practice of time synchronization with your firewalls and your carrier grade NAT, then all you have to do is match up the Shadow Server data set to your data set, and you know exactly what was the device on the inside of the carrier grade NAT or the inside of your firewall, so you can find that. And again, key thing, sign up to the public mailing list. That's the key one of it. So, disrupting cybercrime. Shadow Server, one of the key differentiations for these updates and reports is because many of these happen because of cyber criminal takedowns. Because law enforcement works with Shadow Server for the past 20 years. Well trusted, lots of experience in doing takedown operations, right? So there's a lot of effort into it. So over the years, you can see Shadow Server has been doing all sorts of work doing takedown activities with it, right? You'll get the announcements on here. And what's fun with this is before I was like working inside Shadow Server, and I was like everybody else, a consumer, right? A constituent of Shadow Server, using Shadow Server. I see a new report out, I'll go to like the US Department of Justice on a takedown, and there'll be a court document, and you pull up the official court document, and you got to go all the way down to the bottom of the attachment, and in small print, it would say sync code provided by Shadow Server or scan, so it'll be like, again, low key, right? And so you never knew that Shadow Server was about, helping key component, helping it out, because again, it stays behind the scenes. It's about the impact the takedown happened, not about the credit, right? The important thing is, like in this particular case, take like Quackbot malware disrupted by international cyber criminal takedown. What's important? Taking down the threat, increasing the resiliency of the internet. That's what's important. That's what cyber, and it, as a nonprofit, then it gets you because people don't know you exist, right? Because you don't go out there and brag, right? So a lot of law enforcement activity that happens with it. Now let's take a recent one with this, and this is still going on. Asia Pacific, you got to check your networks. The 9/11 S5 proxy. 9/11 S5 proxy was this takedown where basically it was a criminal VPN system where people downloaded VPN tools, right? And so they set up as a proxy service. So they set up, here's free proxy applications, and they set up other compromised code. So it was either compromised code or as a proxy system. Now, what do you do with this proxy system? This is proxy system, and I helped one organization in Malaysia track this down. It was a government organization. So here they had a government organization. They had somebody inside the government organization behind their firewall, right? And they wanted to watch the European Championships, right? We just had the football match in Europe going on a couple of months back, and they wanted to watch that. But they couldn't get through the firewall to watch the match as they're sitting there bored at work. And they couldn't get around the geo-blocking, right? Because it was only supposed to be broadcasted by official parties in Malaysia who paid for it, not like bypass it and pretend to be in Belgium, right? And this person said, oh, check this out. Here's a new proxy tool. I can use this proxy tool, and I can see the football match, and I can bypass the firewall. That's what the 9/11 proxy system was doing, with many different versions of it. And it installed inside the government network. And it installed a backdoor into the network. So the person sitting there watching the football match is not realizing that person's computer just opened up to be, one, part of a criminal proxy network, and two, opened up a backdoor inside the network. This is the risk. And it's still out there, right? So I had a bunch of services. You can check the slides out later. But what the takedown operation did with law enforcement is Shadow Server was commissioned, say, okay, here, Shadow Server, do the takedown. Now all the command and control for all the proxies and all the other code that was used with backdoors placed into it is all going to the sinkhole. Now the sinkhole says, and this is how we found out, because the organization in Malaysia goes like, hey, we see a couple of these entries in our network. Why are they there? And so we worked together to actually go out there and found this case out, find out exactly what happened forensically. Okay, boom. All right. So that helps out with that part of it, because it's in the reporting part. So here we point out and say, here's the reports that it's in. Sometimes we put it into special reports from Shadow Server, right? The risk is still out there. If you look at 9/11 S5 today, there's a lot of devices sitting there with infected malware inside networks, right? That's a problem, right? Needs to be cleaned up. This was a map for ASEAN. You can see thousands of devices in different countries. You can see where a lot of people were in Thailand, all right? Using these free proxy systems to bypass geo-blocking and things like that, all right? So, and this is another one. Operational Endgame is another example of this. Now, this is one where Shadow Server is working in an alliance, all right? And what happens with the alliance is that a bunch of groups work together, in this case, coordinated with Europol, with Operational Endgame, and then you get special reports out and say, here's all the devices in your network on Smoky Spider, right? And you can get here's a sample, a sanitized sample from one organization, right? And you can see here's Smoke Loader. And, I blocked out the IP addresses and the ASN number, so it's kind of protect the innocent in there. But with that, you can get like the details. So you can say, here's exactly the devices, and you'll have timestamps because you got explicit timestamps there, so you can find out going through the firewall who was it out there. So smoke loader is still a problem out in the internet. This is malware sitting on networks that need to be cleaned up and fixed, right? So you can see them out there. You know, again, using ASEAN maps out here for operational endgame. All right. So let's take a breather real quick. And if we can have anybody who's in the room or online want to ask any questions, I'm wide open to hear any questions at this point, because this would be a good time for any questions. See if anybody has any pressing questions before we go to the next slide.
Yeah, just a reminder, guys, in the room, so Barry can hear you, will need to be on a mic. So if you do have questions, you can come up to the mic. Usual procedure, identify yourself and let us know your association if you can disclose it, and please ask away. So.
Hello, I am Taiji Kimura, working for JPNIC. JPNIC is IP address registry in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
This can be a very basic question. You mentioned in the last part, the email list is the way to communicate with or joining into the community, I think. Do you have any other opportunity to join the community to discuss or catching up the current state of the cyber security?
So that's a good question. And I think what we can do as a follow-up, and I'll put this into the final version of the slide. So you look at notes at the end of the slides for some of the questions on there, is ways you can plug into the community. So one of the things we started at Apricot is we actually have a WhatsApp group for cyber defense, right? So at Apricot, and also, you know, at the APNIC meeting here, we have a lot of security groups out there. So I'll put the tools out there so you can sign up to our community WhatsApp group, and you can ask questions there. Then yesterday, there was the session hosted by First.org. Shadow Server is a member with First.org. And in the follow-up to this, so you look at the back of the slides, there'll be some notes, right, of the version I'll push out tomorrow, right? So you can download the slides, and it will also get it put into the YouTube channel on different First.org special interest groups, right, that are plugged into cybersecurity work, right? It's a lot of the special interest groups, SIGs, in First are open to anybody now. And there's several of them that we're focusing on having what we call conference. We're doing the weekly and biweekly calls at GMT +8 friendly. So GMT +8 is like Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, right? So you got plus or minus. So that means people can be awake, Asia Pacific, and participate in a call. So the first one we're doing within the First.org community, and Shadow Server is a member of that community, right? So this is part of the collaboration work, is the ransomware working group, right? So if you're interested in all the work going on in ransomware, and then there'll be going to be NetSec is the next one, which is network security, right? And so these are good ways of plugging in to meet others and to work on things. And in the first board of directors is promised to invest in some of Zoom's interesting translation features, which in our test call for the ransomware SIG, there's a colleague from Japan, being JPNIC, he was doing an automatic translation from English to Japanese and the subnotes, and he's going, "Oh, this is working pretty good." So, because language is one of the things to do in there. So, thanks for that question, and I'll get a follow up with some good pointers of how to plug into the community within the region. So, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Another question from Wayne.
I'm Wayne from the University of Auckland, but I'm also from the country of Kiribati. So my question is more related to the Kiribati context. As far as I understand from the presentation so far, the data that's coming up on the dashboard is based on the regions and the countries. So you're able to see what's happening from different regions, and you can drill that down into country to the country level. So in Kiribati, we have a situation whereby most of the internet connectivity, the connections that we have at different organizations in the government is mostly via satellite systems that are connected via directly to services like Starlink nowadays, but before that we had geostationary satellites. And what happens if you go to our website and look up your IP address, it will say that you are either in the Philippines or in New Zealand. So I would and this is very common in the government as well as businesses in the US. So I would can Shadow Server provide visibility into what's happening into those different organizations despite this connectivity situation?
So let's take Kiribati and working with the Kiribati CERT team, for example. One of the differences with Shadow Server has with other IP recognition services is because we're working with all the national CSIRTs and our constituents. So like you encourage people on there and they say, okay, I'm getting /28 or /27 from Starlink, right? You buy into that, right? And then when you on Shadow Server, you say, hey, I'm in Kiribati. Here's my /27. In our tables, we mark that as, okay, just even though that is belongs to Starlink, we can tag it and say, this is actually attached to Kiribati. So then when we do the national reports, and this is something we've been working out with the national CSIRTs, and when we do the national reports, the national CSIRT teams are getting, here's Kiribati data, right? So we're more interactive, and because of our relationship to the national CSIRTs and organizations, that the more that we get signed up to, we're able to do that, tune in with it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more audience questions, or did you want to keep going with your content, Barry?
Yeah, let's go ahead and keep on going. And because going into I'm just going to walk through and plug it in. As I talked to before, you notice on here some of the details. Like for instance, the question about Kiribati, you can put in here, here's my network, and it's not like it's a text block. So you can say, here's my network. I'm connected on a /27 via Starlink into my firewall. And then we put that into our notation, and we actually put that as part of a tools that we could summarize up and say, okay, here's national statistics on Kiribati, that is helpful from a national security perspective, right, for the particular country. As a reminder, mentioned before, this data, when you get when Shadow Server delivers the data out, we don't sell the data. So that's a very big thing for the past 20 years. Lots of companies say, hey, I'll pay you lots of money to support you, but you got to give me all your data. Shadow Server walks away. Been in so many different calls over the years where, Shadow Server says, nope, it's non-negotiable. If I'm organization B, I get organization B's address. So since Kiribati was just talked about, if I'm a company in Kiribati, right, I'm B, right? Then another company in Kiribati, that's C. Another company in Kiribati, that's D, right? The only person who gets B's data is B, or C gets C data, D gets D data. The only exception to that is on the national CSIRTs. So then you have a authorized national CSIRT, right? They get the country data. And that's why Shadow Server does these extra pieces of work to say, okay, these particular IP addresses, if you go back here, B could be getting a satellite link from Intelsat. C could be having a terrestrial link going over into Optus. D could be getting a link coming out of a Start Hub. Well, how does the National CSIRT see all three of them as one country? Because it's not, coming from an APNIC block, right? So that's why we put the extra work in there to put it together so the National CSIRT levels on there. Now, even on the National CSIRT levels, we just don't, you can't just raise your hand and say, hey, I'm a National CSIRT. There's guidelines under Open CSIRT that FIRST.org uses and other organizations use to make sure you're going to be responsible and accountable to some sort of authority inside the government to say, you can't just say, I'm a CSIRT, send me data. So, nope. You're also checked. 20 years of Shadow Server's existence, adds on to 10 years extra of First.org's existence, right? So there's a lot of experience with it. Again, everything APIs. So, a lot of companies who've been using email reports from Shadow Server for years, they can now use APIs, and many of them, we get requests maybe, 2 or 3 a week. Hey, you can turn off the emails. APIs are working great, much easier to use that way. One of the tools that you're going to see more of, and you're going to see more of in different countries, is what is the known exploit vulnerability and a timer of how fast you have to get it fixed. So the reason I point out the CISA, the United States, Cyber Security Infrastructure Security Agency, right, is they have a guideline. So if some vulnerability goes on the CISA KEV list, right, known exploit vulnerability, you have so many days to get it fixed. If you don't, they have people knocking on your door. You're in trouble, right? Because it's U.S. government, right? So U.S. government, they're not doing it commercially, they're doing it within U.S. government. So if you're a U.S. government agency, this is happening. I can see by the end of the year, the same thing happening in many countries in Asia. Because if you don't have this sort of focus, again, I point out, the bad guys are using these known exploits as a way to get their ransomware and advanced persistent threat and data exfiltration and, implants into the system. This is how they're doing it. It's easy. New exploit comes out. SciCell is today, Fortinet's tomorrow, Cisco's the next day. It's all going to come out in different time periods, right? And use the latest one out there, right? So when you, again, ASEAN, here is a kind of like breakdown on risk. Whenever you see something in sinkholes, it's infected inside. Now, to give you guys a little story on how this worked out. So years ago, I was running security over Juniper. So I had the Juniper CERT team in a kind of like a pseudo CISO role before there was a CISOs kind of really existed. And every morning to come in, I have my coffee and I look at the Shadow Server report amongst other reports, and there was 19 computers infected from a sinkhole from Medroot. I go like, crap, this is bad. That means this malware is on my network. And Medroot, even though the command and control was sinkhole, people were still using it to actually laterally move inside the organization. So we immediately went in there and removed those 19 computers off the network as soon as possible. Within an hour, we got it off the network. If the bad guys started using it, that would have been bad. And this is a company, we're talking about Juniper Networks. You name the security thing they're doing, it was being done. Part of my job was to make sure to do everything we can do to secure the network. And you will do all that, and threats still happen. So here, the PC was already patched. So it was a Windows system, already patched. Antivirus, all up to date. Several of my team had extra security tools on it, right? And it still got through. It was a malvertisement that got through, right? So get these fixed as fast as possible. It's one of the things to look at. It's top of the list. Lots of risk things to scan. So you see the countries change. Here, Singapore became #1 with the number of risk out there, right? And you got a whole bunch of other things out there with the reports with it, right? So sinkholes, I keep on going at it over and over again, all right? Now, since this APNIC is very oriented around network devices because IP addresses, autonomous systems, things like that. There's a bunch of things out there being targeted. All right. And you take this one right here, there's still a lot of Cisco devices to this particular, threat alert. It happened back in 2018 of using GRE tunnels off the network to actually break into networks. It's interesting in that, I don't know, Shadow Server isn't really scanning for it, but maybe we should start scanning for GRE protocols being open, with ports open with it, right? Because this is a major exfiltration technique because people, the state actors will get in with the easiest sort of things out there, right? So what have you been doing since these alerts come out, right? So we're going to be walking through a couple of these easy ones out here of the cyber threat actors and risk and things like that with it and signing up the daily reports and all this, right? So this, you can see a bunch of the different key ones out here. So if you're going through and trying to if you're a network operator and you want to start using the Shadow Server reports, these are my top lists. These are my top 6 to look at first. Go to Open SNMP, go open accessible SSH so you know exactly which of the SSH ports should be open and which shouldn't. Look accessible telnet. Look at the device identification because the device identification will say, what is this IP? Because Shadow Server will actually map out, here's an inventory of what can be seen from the internet. Oh, this is an Apache system. This is a Cisco box. This is a Juniper box. This is a Huawei box, right? You get that with the device identification. And you'll find things that you go like, wait a minute, what's this IPTV system being live on the network? That's not good. You look at accessible BGP, you look at open BGP, right? This is the top 6. Get these top 6 cleaned up on network fast. Then you go into the next one like TFTP, FTP, things like that. But Telnet, SNMP, if it's SSH to a router, those are things you want to protect, right? Because once you get in and own the router, once you get in and own the switch, you're in the network. And when you see these Volt Typhoon, what does Volt Typhoon do? And Volt Typhoon, you see in the press, it's a big thing jumping up and down with these threat actors, nation-state threat actors in China, who are, again, nation-state threat actors are doing their job. They are hired by the government to go out there and do things for the government. And they've been doing it for over a decade. I encountered the Volt Typhoon guys back in 2012 when I was running a mobile network in Indonesia. Okay. And they're using the same techniques they used in 2012 and they're using them today and they're working today. Again, if you're a government threat actor, you don't want to work hard. You want to get the job done. They're breaking into network devices, right? So, this is the network devices are easy targets to go after, all right? Just a few of them will give you huge access to the different activities. You get into it with SNMP and you can break out and go and say, oh, wow, I got a network map. I can see other things going on with it, right? So there's a lot of different things you can do with it. So in old technique, what you would do with network devices is number 1, go out there and scan. So if I'm a bad guy, go out, scan. Can I find Telnet? Can I find TCP ports? Can I find my SNMP ports, right? Can I find things like Cisco Smart Install and others kind of easy install devices, installation tools that haven't been turned off from Fortinet, Cisco, Juniper and others, right? Zycel, right? And say, that's my reconnaissance. Now let's go check these out. So now I go out there and I weaponize it. I go in there and get into it. Oh, check this out. TFTP is open. Cool. I can use TFTP. What's there? I can use SNMP. I can use Telnet. If Telnet is left open, then the likelihood of somebody watching for a low-level brute force attack to guess the password, it's likely that nobody is looking at the logs. Nobody even has login turned on. So I can sit there and just poke, take a day, and boom, okay, I got the password to the router, right? So that's the part of the weaponization and delivering inside. And then once I'm inside I got inside one router. That's all I need. Ah, there we go. Now I can start moving around doing other things. Right? I can start exploiting. Right? This is the sort of thing that where, you know, the number one tool I use for like watching my network was Shouter Server. Every network I've been running since, you know, 15 years ago, Shouter Server has been my primary outside in tool to find out, have I left anything wide open, right? You know, and this kind of goes to, this is this old toolkit. Now, what I just did with each of these 6 stages, right? That's from a 1997 talk at Apricot One. And I'd really be surprised when I saw this Cisco password type come out as an advisory, right? Over a decade later. And this was actually talked about, you know, this is 2022 when this advisory came out. And this was talked about back in 1997, right? So this is, the bad guys use old, easy stuff. And that's, you know, living off the land, what they talk about. This is what we example, the old, easy stuff. It's not new to us. We've been talking about for a while. What we're trying to do is figure out how to get people to fix it. Because what we see with these attacks, like with, as in this case, the Volt Typhoon crew, you know, the government guys in China are doing their job. The government guys in the United States are doing their job. All right. They're getting into your infrastructure for their needs. What's your job? Get them off your network. Get them off your network. They shouldn't be there. So let's take easy ways of rethinking and get them off the network. So this goes into rethinking the, you know, the cybersecurity risk. You can get them off your network. All right. So simple things, best common practices. You hear this all the time. They work. When I go in there to help a company turn around their cybersecurity posture, I'm always focusing on the basics. And sometimes they go like, these are really basic. We could have done this before. I say, yes, you could have done it before. You didn't. Let's fix that problem, right? So let's take an example. 2012, I go in to help take an Indonesian cell phone company and help turn it around. Got a really fantastic engineering team, you know, and working with them. And I get the Shouter Server reports. So one of the first things I do is I get the Shouter Server reports for my networks. And I look at it, I go like, holy cow. And I did some quick research. I said, all right, I got state actors. I got the Chinese state actors. I got the UK state actors. I got the US state actors. I got the Iranian state actors. I got the Russian state actors. They're all over the network. They're like planted. Because it's a cell phone network. I got to get them off the network. Right? That's my job. Get them off the network. My job is to turn the company around. Let's go out there. I go to my boss who owns the company. He says, hey, I need to build a cybersecurity department. We got all this threat. He goes like, oh, make me money first. So I go, okay, what do I do? I got college recruiting program. So I grab 2 kids right out of college, just graduated. 2 weeks after graduation to come join the company. Hey, you're going to become cybersecurity people. We're going to take 1 Shouter Server report a week, and we're going to go out there and we're going to address it. All right. Here's the details about the risk. Here's the report. We're going to pick one of them. So I teach them how to take these reports and say, let's pick one of them. Let's understand it. Teach them the technology. All right. And so now this is a network with a lot of security risk. And so what we did is we didn't panic. We just picked one a week. Right. We picked a new report, reviewed the risk. So I taught them. Like, here's this protocol. Let's have them learn about it. They're brand new, you know, but they're smart, they're eager, they're hungry, right? We go out there and we figure out how to mitigate the risk. Let's write up a change procedure. Let's come up with the change, you know, let's put the change process in. Let's get the routers upgraded, the switches upgraded, firewall rules in place, fix the configuration. You know, we figured out the mitigation, we deployed it, right? We documented then a policy so we don't repeat the mistake. We work with the vendor so we don't repeat the mistake, right? So we set it up where we prevent it from happening again, right? So then we've mitigated the risk. And then we ask ourselves, could the bad guys have used this to get in? And if we think so, we do an investigation. We start doing more digging, find out where the bad guys went. And then if we don't think so, we just go back, we pick another report, we do it all over again. And we did this over and over and over again. Within 3 months, these 2 security kids were fantastic. They started coming in and say, hey, Pak Berry, started teaching me things. And hey, did you know about this? And hey, we figured this stuff out. And I'm going like, oh, this is so great. Now, how much did that cost me? 2 kids are already hired out of college as a college recruitment program, and a shadow server report, which didn't cost me anything. All right. It's not expensive to actually get this effective. And within 6 months, we had that network under control, locked down. Stuff coming in from shadow server scanning was not there. We started going out there and getting pen test companies coming in. We started bringing vendor required testing coming in. We started doing other things. And those 2 became the security gurus as we were going through all those exercises to actually take security even to the next level. But you notice for the first 6 months, we did things very cost effectively, and it kind of works with it. So you take an example on there with Simple Network Management Protocol. That was the first one we did. So this is off of a live, big, massive network, right? That was not supposed to have SNMP out on any of the network infrastructure, right? That I was actually working inside at the time, right? And look at the details that comes. This is the shadow server report. So the shadow server report or OpenSNMP, you get a whole bunch of details on here. Like here's the actual device. And this is what a bad guy can see. The bad guy can see here is the public open on SNMP, and I get the software details that I can go up by and get the Metasploit for it, right? So because all this is SNMP v2 public community open, wide open to the world. It's a gate. It's one of the first gateways in, and it's one of the first gateways that Volt Typhoon uses and other nation state threat actors use to get, start doing scanning into the network and get a foothold. Now, how do you fix this? I did a write-up on Senkey is my website that I use to write a lot of these sort of empowerment materials. As I mentioned at the top of the call, I do a lot of these sort of talks to empowerment materials. And that's where, so you go here and there's a SNMP guide. It was actually the SNMP guide from a book. If Philip Smith is down, I don't know if Philip Smith came to this APNIC, but you'll see Philip Smith in the community. But Philip and I wrote this book called ISP Essentials. So I basically took the SNMP security chapter and enhanced it, and that's what this is, all right, and up to date with it. Now, what I just repeated here is not, it's not new. When I was in the U.S. Air Force back in the 80s, we call these preventive maintenance inspection. If you wanted to find out if a unit was ready to go to war, the inspectors, when they did quality inspections, they checked your maintenance logs. Are you doing your checks day in, day out? Are you fixing the things that need to get fixed? Because if you don't do that, the airplanes don't fly, the radars don't work, the missiles don't work, right? If you don't do that on your network today, people get inside your network and use it for all sorts of bad stuff, right? So, are you doing your preventive maintenance, preventive cybersecurity inspection reports, right? Now, you can get overwhelmed with shadow server, right? You can, if you haven't done it before and you haven't been doing cybersecurity, your reports come in, you go like, holy cow, there's a lot of risk there. Don't get bought into like, oh, I got to fix everything. Because what happens is you try to fix everything, right? Right? If I got a couple of things I'm going to fix, you can get them done. I'm going to pick 1 or 2 things a week. I get it done. But if I try to get, I'm going to try to get 10 things done this week. You might get 1 thing done. I tried to do 10, but I only got 1. And then if you get like a boss that says, oh, fix everything right away, that's not going to work. You end up getting nothing. So, gauge yourself. Gauge yourself where you say, just pick 1, right? And then go with it, right? So here's the aspect of that, right? So again, we kind of repeated these slides. So security excuses, a tool like Shadow Server, you can't just ignore it anymore. It's cheap. It's easy to do, right? So, that's kind of aspect of it. So we're going to close off right now with this one because we're running short on time. I'm just going to shut off the sharing there. And then we're wide open to any more questions that people have.
Awesome. We do have someone coming up for a question. Great.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm from Chorus, New Zealand. I've been subscribing to your alerts for a while now, but I've been too lazy to learn your API and create a dashboard for myself. And I was wondering, why couldn't I just log into your website and your wonderful dashboards and have it narrow down to show me my own autonomous system details?
That is a aspiration that we are looking for funding to actually build the per autonomous system web portal for people. So that's honest limitation. So as we go through and doing our 2024, 2025 funding campaign, we're pitching to people to join the alliance and fund the next level of the dashboard where people can log in themselves. So
cool. Do you have any collateral on your website about how to create your dashboard so that I could do it easily?
You'll see some more webinars coming out. We got University of Guam's going to teach us how to use Grafana because I got it pulled into Grafana. We're going to do another broadcast of Intel MQ, which is a tool that you can, it's an open source tool. We got a Splunk. So you're going to be seeing a lot more because I'm an operator guy. So a lot more DevOps and work with the particular tools themselves with people who have actually pulled the data in, do a webinar on it, put the tools out there. We got an API community email list that'll put in the follow-up that you can sign up to and say, hey, has anybody got it working with, successfully with this data lake application? And then people will jump in and help you with that.
Cool. Thank
Good
you.
question. Thank you.
Question from me, Eduardo, APNIC community trainer. With the APIs that you're developing, is there a possibility to extend it to some kind of threat feeds that you can integrate with existing security solutions? Just
So
with reporting.
yes. So if you have the public mail list is kind of like a threat feed, right? So that's one of them out there. We have in Intel MQ, you can pull the APIs into and export it out into MISP or Styx Taxi, right? So you can do those. We got people using it for those sort of things. There's a tool for converting it into the open login format. So if you want to put it into like Graylog or Splunk, there's a tool for that, right? So that's sort of a question. We got this conversational mail list on the API community that I'll put as part of the last slide on here. So here's some follow-up notes. And you can join that alias and just ask questions. Hey, what about this tool? What about that tool? And that's one of the key things moving into 2025 is really help people integrate the APIs into their existing threat feed tools. Yeah.
Well, one more question and then we'll finish up.
Mm-hmm.
So, hi. So I'm Kumar from Nepal. Basically, thank you for the wonderful presentation that you have. So learned a lot. So I'm a cybersecurity practitioner, giving training and awareness from community side as well in Nepal. But I used to show live threat map of different OEMs like Checkpoint and FireEye. And we always see that Nepal is top targeted country. But if I show the dashboard of Shadow Server, then there is no rare. So how can we help and contribute to the community?
So what you'll find is actually there is risk there. You just have to
Definitely. But
I think as a follow-up with their Nepal, right?
yeah.
So I'll put in there. Here's a couple of links on the dashboard and to follow up and say here's Nepal, so you can see some of the dashboard materials around Nepal. Now the national cert team in Nepal does get our reports too. And I think it's just 1 to 2 people there. But if you email me, then I can actually put you in contact with them. And they're always looking for help.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that will conclude now for our session, Barry. Thank you everyone for giving us some of your morning tea time as well. But now I think a round of applause would be appropriate for Barry. Thank you.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you for attending the first tutorial. Next tutorial will be in approximately 20 minutes or so on V6. But yeah, thank you very much, Barry. I enjoyed that with that lot as well. It's not excellent work.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Everyone.
When I think of me,